Hello and welcome to Keys to the Market with RaciaSellsHomes, Realtor at the House Store. Today on this episode, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people have heard about but just don't always understand fully, and that's auctions. So when most people hear the word auction, they just automatically picture someone talking a mile a minute or raising their little paddles or something to that effect. But auction in real estate is a total different process than that. So we're going to dive into all this, answer a lot of questions, talk about some myths and misconceptions. And to help us break all of that down today, I've got Missy Houston with Legacy Auctions as my special guest today. Missy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on. Yeah. So can you tell our viewers just a little bit about yourself and your auction company?
I own a company called Legacy Realty and Auction. I'm the principal auctioneer and principal broker. I've been doing this 16 years, and it's just in my blood. I love it.
I think it's not with real estate too. When it's in your blood, it's just in your blood. So, and she is really good at what she does. She's telling the truth about that. It is in her blood. I've seen her in action, and she is good. Okay, so I think it's going to be a very educational series today. So let's just kind of jump in and talk about some basics. So what does an auctioneer actually do?
We actually take property, or whether it's personal property or real property, and auction it to the highest bidder. So we run marketing extensively, and I say it's like it's almost like a revival that you used to have back in the day, back in the Old South, and they you are marketing an event more than you're marketing a property. So you've got a time and a date that is something's going to be auctioned off, and then we market it for about 3 weeks, and so it's a really quick marketing process. So we try to bombard everybody with the information as quickly and as effectively as we possibly can.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I think it's interesting because many people do assume that an auctioneer's job is just standing there and entertaining bids. But as you said, there's a lot of preparation that goes in behind the scenes, and a lot more than just that, like you talked about the marketing and things like that. So can you give us just a little bit of a synopsis of all the different things that come with the actual, you mentioned the marketing. What are some other things that you have to do to get a property ready?
We have to run title. It's opposite of selling real estate the regular way as an agent, in that we want to make sure that the title is clear. That a lot of what we do are estate properties and large land tracts, and things that have a lot of encumbrances to them, and so we want to make sure that the title is clean prior to the auction, where in regular real estate you wait until you get a contract, and then contract to close you'll run title and make sure everything's copacetic. But with an auction, we want to make sure that all of the bidders know where they stand up front.
Okay. So when you talk about the marketing, and you said you really just bombard with the marketing, and you're marketing an event more so than the property, so it kind of creates a competitive environment for the property too, and kind of brings buyers together like all at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. It's a completely different mindset. A lot of I'll say some agents, like large land tracts per se, agent will have a large land tract for sale, and there's only so much that they can do with a large land tract, and so they with an auction we offer being able to go in. An agent can have it listed on the market for 2.5 years, and we'll put an auction sign up, and then all of a sudden we'll get a buyer before we can get our signs put up. I mean, it changes who's looking at the land. We auctioned off Bridgewater Baptist Church, this Bridgewater Event Center years ago, and everybody looked at it. It was listed for 3 years, and everybody looked at it as a church. And we put an auction sign up, and everybody was looking at it as an event center or a drug rehab, or looking at it from a completely different angles. Right. And for some reason, the word auction brings that.
It does. And I think too, it's important that you noted a lot of people do have trouble when they see a property marketed a certain way. That's kind of the only way they see it. And then when you kind of bring it full circle and offer it as different potential venues, then that does create more of a diverse interest too, because you've got people looking at it for the different things you talked about. So I think that's a big plus too. So I've always enjoyed hearing about how people got into the auction process. So everybody kind of seems to have a little bit of a unique path. So can you kind of tell us how you got into the auction business?
Well, I wasn't in real estate. I actually got into the auction business by getting into real estate and the auction business all at the same time. Interesting enough, I was buying a house over in Village Green, and the listing agent was an auctioneer, and that house ended up falling through. But he talked, my ex-husband was my real estate agent at the time, and he talked to him about the auction business, and we were both like, well, that sounds really interesting and it sounds really fun. So we jumped in, feet first. And then it was interesting, that house had fallen through in Village Green, so a PAL auction actually had for sale up in Seven Oaks West came up for auction, and I bought that house at auction. And so that was my first dive into, and went to the real estate school and auction school, and just went from there. And it's actually a really extensive process to become an auctioneer. I'm a principal broker also in real estate, but to be an auctioneer, you go to school for about 3 to 6 weeks, and then I went to Nashville Auction School, and then you take a test to become an apprentice. So you become an apprentice for 2 years, and you have to work under a principal auctioneer, and then you go back to school, and then you take another state test to become an auctioneer. So it's a little over 2 year process.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting, and you just loved it the first time you encountered it. So that's great. I love to hear stories like that.
Kids grew up in the auction business. My daughter would clerk people in and give them bidder numbers, and she was
That's
like
cute.
8.
That's cute. I know my son grew up in the real estate business too, and when they learn it from that young of an age, it's just amazing what they know subconsciously and things they'll comment sometimes. Yeah, it's really cute.
Ashton would boss everybody around. We're like, you can't do that, Ashton.
She's using that auction voice.
Yes,
okay, so let's talk a little bit about why someone would choose an auction. So there's several options out there, but one of the biggest questions I hear is, why would someone want an auction property instead of listing it the traditional way? So I know from my standpoint some of the reasons that I have and the conversation I would have, but from an auctioneer standpoint, how would you answer that question?
Well, it's a quick, expedited sale. People have to have motivation and equity in their property to get that mindset to where it works. An absolute auction sells better at auction, of course, and an absolute auction in comparison to a reserve auction is it's selling regardless of price. A reserve auction is we set a price, but we say it's based on seller confirmation. Seller has the right to accept or reject any and all bids. And so we have a target price that we're kind of shooting at, but it gives them a choice. If say it's a $500,000 house and the bidding comes in at $485, then they have the choice whether they can take that or not.
Right.
So an absolute brings more people, because and that's the first question that I usually get from people, is it an absolute or reserve auction? And then the second question is, well, what do you think it's going to go for? And so my question back to them is, well, what would you give me today for it?
Yeah,
and
right.
Then, but an absolute puts a court ordered or some sort of marketing taglines to put on auctions works the best, because it brings that urgency about, and that's what we want, is people urgent to come and look at the property because they know it's going to sell, and they know they're either going to have to get their foot in the door or not. And so it just brings that urgency, and then it becomes a competition once somebody gets interested in the property, it becomes a competition, and then it's the win-win, you know, I want to win, I don't want somebody else to win mentality, so
Right, yeah.
works really well.
Yeah, that's and it's interesting how that works, because when you and I've been at not a real estate auction but other types of auctions, and you know, when you're bidding on something you think you want it, and then you know, when people start bidding you're like, I really want that, and like the more somebody else bids, the more you find yourself wanting to bid. So it does really create a lot of urgency in the buyers for that, for sure.
The first auction I ever attended was when I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and my ex-husband and I went to an auction, an estate auction, and he gave me the bidder number and went to the restroom. He came back and I had bought a 1970 non-cable ready television and an old rocking chair, and he goes, what did you do? And I said, I just got really excited.
And that can happen for sure.
So give me that bidder number back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have done that. So let's talk through some of these things. So one thing that stands out to me is the certainty. So if it's absolute, it's going to sell regardless. So with a traditional sale, a property might sit on the market for weeks or months, and sometimes even a year or longer. So when it's an auction establishes a specific date, so you know that date's going to happen. You know, not only from the seller side but from the buyer side, you know it's going to be sold that date. So what are some situations where an auction might be particularly beneficial? I know we briefly mentioned estates, but there's some other instances too.
Yes. And that's the great thing about auctions, is there is a time and a date that it's going to sell. It's sold as is, where is, and it's not contingent upon financing. So about 90% of everything I do is cash buyers. It works really well for, say you have a piece of land that's got a trailer on it that is not on a permanent foundation. Well, that's going to have to be a cash buyer because banks won't loan on that. So an auction works really well for a situation like that. Estates, we go in and we clean out the house for the family. They'll get everything they want out of the house, and then we go in and we clean out the house for them. We donate items. We sell, you know, certain items if there's larger items to auction, like cars or heavy equipment or something like that. And then we, and so the estates work really well. I get them with an estate attorney, we walk them through probate, and we do everything contract to close. A divorce situation is a really good auction option. And then large land tracts sell better at auction than listing a large land tract, because what the auctioneer can do is say you've got 100 acres and we work with surveyors, so the surveyor would go in and break the pieces of property up into smaller tracts where an agent can just sell it as a whole. And we will do a map of the best laid scenarios with road frontage, and then, because it's, say you've got a pizza pie, I always give this analogy, you've got a pizza pie and you own a pizza business, and you can sell the pizza as a whole, so say for $15, but if you break it up into slices, you can sell each slice for $5 a piece. So, and a lot more people can afford the $5 slice than they can the whole pie. And so it works the same way with large land tracts.
And I think that is very important to note too. A lot of it is about, once you divide a large land parcel up, it is more affordable for the buyer, because a lot of buyers want some land, but not necessarily 100 acres, but they also can't afford the price tag for 100 acres. Exactly. So if you're dividing that up, you've got smaller parcels, which in turn lets more buyers have the potential to purchase because they can afford that price range better.
Correct. I'm also, I've been to court, you know, with divorced couples. I treat everybody really fairly. I'm an expert witness with real estate and auctions for Knox County. You know, it's just, it's a process. And usually what I love about what I do is that most of the time who we're dealing with, even like if it's a large family, large family farm, or a divorce or an estate where someone's passed away, and you get people that aren't at their best. And so I'm really good at hand-holding and walking people through the process, because they're just in a situation they don't really want to be in. Getting back to one of your questions about what's another scenario that's better for auctions, is we can pull things off of foreclosures. So if you're facing a foreclosure and you've got equity in your property, there's no sense in losing that piece of property to the bank. When an auctioneer can come in, we can stop a foreclosure because a bank will stop it for an auctioneer, because there is a time and a date involved, and they know when they're going to get their money. If we have a certain amount that we have to get off of it before it changes title, the bank can bid in the first bid. It just works. The foreclosures work really, really well.
And I think too, part of the stigma, and we may touch on this a little later in the podcast, but a lot of banks have auctioned off foreclosure properties. So I think a lot of people just assume that if it's an auction property, it's a foreclosure, or there's like something wrong with the property. But that is totally incorrect, because like you said, you can stop a foreclosure. So if you're facing a foreclosure, call Missy. She can help you with that. We don't have to get to that process. But also, it's not just a foreclosed property if it's at auction too. There's a lot of reasons that people auction properties, and they're good, viable properties. Mm-hmm. So I think it is important to establish that difference.
If a property is, you're going to get into a bidding war over a property, it's a hot property, and you know that you're going to have a lot of people competing over it, and it's a great piece of property, go to auction with it, because then you don't set a ceiling, an expectation by putting something on the market at a certain price, where with the auction it bids up, and when you are selling it, you negotiate down usually. So with auctions, you negotiate up, so you don't set that expectation of, well, it didn't get this when it was listed, so I'm only going to bid this.
Right.
You can just run with it.
Yeah, and it is nice that bids go up instead of, if it has sat there for a while, people always want to offer less. So that's definitely a good point too. So at the end of the day, we talked about all these different things that kind of help determine the value, but at the end of the day, the market actually determines the value.
Correct. I say an auction is about one of the best processes of appraisal that you can get, because it's going to be what somebody's going to pay that day for that piece of property.
Right. And that's what it's about, because there's a buyer for everything.
Yes.
It just, sometimes properties take a lot longer to find said buyer, but unless you're at auction, you've got that urgency created. So the deadline, you've got the date, the time set, so it just kind of moves things along a little bit faster. And it is a very valid option for, if you're thinking about listing your home, it's a very valid option to explore. So we'll give lots of information how to contact us on that a little bit later in the show. So let's talk a little bit more about the misconceptions. We talked about the bank foreclosures, but I think a lot of people still just associate that with, foreclosures and distressed type properties. But there's also other myths about that. So a lot of people think that they're just going to sell for pennies on the dollar. And as you talked about, auctions can actually drive the price up. So can you talk a little bit about that misconception?
Yeah, when you think about auctions, you more think about it as homes and on the courthouse steps and that type of scenario, when it's just not like that at all. There is auctions on the courthouse steps, but the county's doing that, and you're really going to get pennies on the dollar at that point for it, because there's no marketing involved in it, and it's just advertising in a legal newspaper. But with the way we do it is we, really, it's on land.com, it's on Lands of America, it's on specific sites and there's advertisements ran on specific areas. Like if it's in a, like we did a Airbnb and auctioned off all of the contents in the Airbnb, and that's something we can go in and we can do. The misconception is that, you know, it has to be a distressed property. Well, that's not true, because some of the most expensive things in the world are auctioned off. The number one thing does the most money for auction is actually racehorses, thoroughbred racehorses. And so, you know, they're giving millions of dollars for a horse. And
yeah, that's a lot of money for a horse. And
or the cars
at an auction.
Yeah, or the car auctions, and there's just a lot of misconceptions out there that it has to be a distressed property. Most of your most expensive houses are even auctioned off. They've got auction companies that just go around all over the country and do multi-million-dollar homes all over the world.
Yeah, so it's definitely not just the pennies on the dollar. It can be,
but
yeah, get out ahead of that. Talk to Missy before you get to that point, and then it won't be. So, okay, so another one is talking about you've got multiple qualified buyers. So when you have a house on the market, people are looking at it, and a lot of times in our line of work, unfortunately, they'll call and want to go look at houses. They haven't even talked to the lender yet. And so my first thing is always, you know, get with the lender, let's see what you qualify for, let's see what type of loan you qualify for. So it's a process, but when the bidders come to this auction, they're already qualified, or they have that proof of funds in hand that they've proven to you, so you know you've got multiple qualified buyers.
Correct. And like I said, most of everything I do is cash buyers, but how an auction works is the seller pays a small marketing fee for the property, and that's usually paid at the beginning of the sales contract, and then we go through all of the marketing and everything. We have the auction day, and when the buyers come, they know that, you know, they're registered on the bidding site, and usually everything we do now is online. After COVID, everybody just wanted to sit at home and be at home instead of going to the live auctions. But yes, they're pre-qualified, and they're going to give, how we get paid is a 10% buyer's premium added to whatever the highest bid price is. So say the house goes for $500,000, then the buyer is going to give me a check the day of the auction for $50,000. So the price of the property will be $550,000. It's like them giving a 10% deposit down. It is a non-refundable deposit. It is not escrow money. So the only way they can get that back is if for some reason they can't get clear title, which we've already ran the title work on it. So you know, they're locked in. So you're not going to give up $50,000 to mess up a contract.
No, you're not gonna just hand that over and walk away for sure. And that's the difference too with like our sales contracts. The earnest money is, there's a lot of reasons why it is refundable. There's very few that it's not, but like with yours, it is non-refundable. So it's more of a guarantee that your buyer is serious about it too. So a lot of pluses to add in there. So that's a lot of information for consumers, because a lot of consumers just roll out auctions before they really understand how it works. So that's our goal with this episode, is to try to educate you as a buyer, as a seller, as a homeowner, as anybody interested in the whole auction process. And you talked a little bit about how the auction process works. So you evaluate the property, you determine whether an auction is a right fit. So if somebody comes to you and they want to auction, it's not always a right fit.
It's not always the right fit. And I've been doing it long enough to where I can walk in a property and go, this is an auction all day long, or this is they just need to list the property. A lot of that, getting back to the motivation and equity, is where someone has to be comfortable with the auction process. I mean, I'm going to help them through it, but they're going to have some comfort level. And you know, it's a great choice.
It is a great choice. I know I met Missy actually at a CE class. I wasn't very familiar with the auction process and the real estate side. I knew a little, but the class itself was just amazing because I learned so much. And so that just kind of made me think, well, you know, if the realtors don't completely understand it, and some do, we have some realtors that actually are auctioneers also, and that's great. There's a lot that don't necessarily understand it, but we also need to educate the public. So the buyers, the sellers, and just homeowners in general. So that's our goal, was just to help educate on that. It was very interesting, some of the things that I learned, and even today learning about the thoroughbred horse being the most expensive auction item. I did not know that, so we can always learn something, even though it didn't relate to real estate or a house. Yes, it's still an interesting fact to know, so yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the marketing. So how important is the marketing to a successful auction?
Oh, it's very important. It's going to get, your database is really important. A lot of who I deal with are investors, so you know, they're on my list to contact all the time, and I have investors constantly texting me and saying, you got anything that's coming up? And you know, it really works well. Like the Airbnb that we auctioned off in Benton, that's a specific buyer. So we had to get onto Airbnb sites, you know, for the homeowners and for the people looking for Airbnbs, and to drive home those people that would be interested in owning something like that in a small town. Or the same thing with land auctions, you know, land.com, Lands of America, Land and Farm, all of these websites I belong to. We can auction off commercial property, so I belong to LoopNet, and so we can advertise it out to the commercial buyers. So it's I pay a lot of money every month to have these extra ability to, you know, to advertise.
Yeah, and she does get them out there, and that is an important part of it, is getting the marketing out there, and she does a fantastic job of that. So we already talked a little bit about the qualified buyers and how critical that is. So what should a buyer know before attending an auction?
That they have to be serious. They have to be pre-approved. They're going to put down a 10% buyer's premium, and that's going to be a non-refundable deposit. And they have to know that it's being sold as is, where is, and it's not contingent upon financing. So they really have to be serious. They have 30 days from the auction date to close on the property, but like I said before, the title work and everything's already done. So if somebody's paying cash and they want to close in a week, then we can go ahead and close it, you know, out in a week.
Okay, that all sounds so great. So once the auction day arrives, what can participants expect? I know you said a lot of it is online, but can you kind of walk us through that process online, but then also if it is like an in-person auction?
Yeah, you get registered. You get registered on my website, and it's an online bidding platform that I use, and you give a credit card, but they don't run the credit card, and you just become pre-qualified for the auction, and then I have to approve the bidder. So I would approve the bidder, and don't wait till the last minute. I have so many people that bid, you know, the auction's at noon, and they bid it, you know, they're getting on to register at 11:45, and it's just like, don't do that, because the auctioneer's really busy doing a lot of other things, and we've got to approve you, and we've got to do, so make sure you do all your due diligence and everything ahead of time. The auctioneer usually will show you the property, so you can look at the property. I've had a lot of people that bring contractors through to check the house out, and it's a really seamless thing to do. Just don't wait till the last minute.
Yeah, just be proactive. Get your ducks in a row. Yes.
And then with the auction platform, say it's at noon, and you have somebody that bids at 11:59 or at noon, and then the website will set itself for another 60 seconds. So you bid in that 60-second time period, and it'll count it down for you and tell you how much time's left. And then if somebody else bids within that minute, then it'll reset itself for another minute. So it gives people the ability to go back and forth.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about when you get the winning bid. So let's say I'm online, I'm bidding on a property, and I get the winning bid. So what's next for me?
Then I'll send you the contract, the auction contract, via dot loop, so it's electronic signature, and then I will meet you somewhere to pick up a check, or you can overnight it to me, or and that goes into escrow, the escrow account, and then you've got the 30 days to close.
Okay. So now when you close, do you close out a title company?
We do.
So the same as traditional, just title work's all done up front in
Correct.
this instance,
Correct.
but still the same closing process.
Correct.
All right, this was absolute fantastic information. I want to do a little segment called rapid fire questions. These are just like little quick answers, and there's actually some really good questions in these. So I think it's just things that would be like little quick, easy answers for people to just know. Some of these may not be super quick answers. So just the first thing that comes to your mind. So what is the most memorable auction you've ever conducted?
We auctioned off a marine store. So little, everything that you use for a boat. And then we auctioned off some of the boats at the marine store, people that had abandoned the boats. And we're getting ready, we're going through, we're lotting everything. It was the middle of August. They had no air conditioning at all, and so we were doing it in 90-something degrees inside, and the cops show up and arrest the owner of the marine store, because he was going through a divorce, and they got into it or something.
Oh
And
no.
the cops show up and arrest him in the middle of the thing. We're like, what's going on?
Wow.
So that was pretty memorable.
Yeah, that would be
Bridgewater was
memorable.
pretty memorable. We auctioned off $40,000 worth of personal property that day. You know, everything that is in a church, pews and everything. And it was in the middle of an ice storm.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
back
So
in
you've,
the ice storm.
you've got on both ranges of the
Yes.
spectrum there.
Yes.
Okay, so what is the most, what's the largest crowd you've worked with?
We probably Bridgewater. We had we went ahead with the auction even though there was an ice storm, and almost wrecked getting there, and somebody fell outside and broke their leg. I mean, it was just, but we had 150 people show up that day.
Wow.
In the middle of an ice storm.
In the middle of an ice storm.
And you know, it would just, the bids were incredible.
That was due to great marketing.
It's due to great marketing.
Yes. So what's one thing every seller should know before considering an auction?
That a seller should know. One, they're only going to pay a marketing fee, and the buyer is going to pay the 10% buyer's premium. So it's going to cost them a lot less. They don't have to worry about home inspections and fixing things and the contract falling through because there was something that wrong with the air conditioner, there's something wrong with this, that, and the other. And then that really the misconception is that an absolute auction is definitely scarier, but it brings more money for the property.
I think that's probably the one I've heard the most.
Yeah.
is that. Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, so last one, best advice for someone who's attending their first auction.
Call ahead, go look at the property ahead of time, have a one-on-one conversation with the auctioneer, make sure that you understand what you're getting into. And there's good auctioneers in this town, so you know, they'll guide you through everything and really hold your hand, help you through it.
Okay, great. This was fantastic conversation,
Yes.
great information. I hope that you've learned a lot of things today. If you have questions about what we talked about or something that maybe we didn't get a chance to cover, I will have all of Missy's contact information posted so you can reach out to her. You can always reach out to me. We'll do our best to get an answer to whatever questions you may have. And as always, if you or anyone you know is looking to buy or sell, Racia Lawson, Realtor at the House Store, where every move matters.